Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for tonight's stream. It's always glad to see you. I'm always glad to see you. Sorry, been mowing a lot of grass today. It's been a long day. Uh, hey there, El Gusto, Osiris, Blondie. Let's see. Brandy's here. Looks like we've got some lurkers. That's always fine. Welcome to your Wednesday stream. We've got some cool stuff today. Um, Got a little Rayford Woods for you guys, of course. Hey, Crystalline. We've got a little Rayford Woods for you. We've got a little Cashmere for you. We've got the next two parts, the middle parts of our Klein Institute that we've been working on. And we've got the last Grandpa story. I kind of debated just making it a surprise, like not reading it on the stream. But I mean, you guys have been here for the long haul. I feel like you guys deserved an early peek. You guys deserve to hear it read, and I'm sure you'll listen to it again Friday anyway. Next week's Cozy Horror, I'm planning to do a Grandpa retrospective. So all of our Cozy Horrors next week will be Grandpa stories. Monday through Friday, it'll be all Grandpa. So you can get caught up and everybody can get on the same page for the grand finale next Friday. Um, I've been talking with a few people about it, and it's not going to be the last we ever see of it's not going to be the last we ever see of the characters. We'll revisit Marcus and Glimmer and our other friends at Grandpa's house. You guys will see them again for certain. Um, but this is how we're gonna close it out. It's very bittersweet. I like the series. It's been going for a long time. But everything has to come to an end eventually. And it was just time. It was time for the next step on that one. So I do hope that you guys enjoy it, and I hope that it lives up to the hype because it's been a very popular series. Um, let's see what else. What else? Do we have any news? Do we have any news? Um, I think the Stragview book is coming out next month. I believe it's ready. I just got to get off my butt and do something with it. So that should be middle of July, uh, next month. I had really hoped that Towsy Homestead would be ready next month. The audiobook. But Eileen has come through with another one, so I'm going to read that one too. she's a prolific writer. Like she's really throwing these words down. And she likes me to read to her almost as much as you guys do. So I'm picking up another one. I just finished Butterfly. It just got approved. I don't know when it's going live, but I'll keep you guys posted. That one's a story about a robot observer that comes to Earth and discovers a little bit of humanity inside of himself. So keep an eye out for that one. That one should be pretty cool. What else? What else? What else? We got any other news? As many of you know, I got remonetized, so that was nice. I liked that. Um, we'll see how long it takes before YouTube decides to take it away again. But maybe they're done with all of these games they play. But we'll see. Blondie's right. Yeah, it's available to read on Kindle. As are all of her books. But the audiobook is the audiobook's the one that I get paid for. So I'm a little partial to pushing you guys towards the audiobooks. Um Yeah, no, it was a fun project to work on. The two I'm working on right now, she's got Once Upon a Morgue, sorry, and then she's got another one called The Pond, which is supposed to be a vampire romance or something. I'm not 100%, but once I figure into it, I'll give you guys some updates. I'm not 100% sure what it's got going on at the moment. So, and yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. Should be something fun. Um, I'd expect that one to be done. Oh God, July or August or something. I don't know. I'm gonna read both of them at the same time, essentially, and one of them's a little bigger than the others. So, give you something nice to read for fall, I guess. Um, wish me luck. It's not book related news, but I have no doubt that it was Osiris. He definitely was pulling for me, as were all of you guys, I would think. Um, what was I saying? Oh yeah, non book related news, but say a prayer for me. I'm going for my sergeant's exam in the next couple of weeks, and I'll keep you guys posted if I get a promotion. I don't really want to stay at the prison all that long, but it'd be nice to make an extra $1.50 an hour, I guess. Um, and yeah, it's really about all we got. I see that a lot of you guys have been enjoying the content on Audible. My audience is growing on there. Not quickly, but it's growing. We're going by leaps and bounds. So we'll get there. We're we're definitely not monetized on Spotify yet, but we're getting there. So it'll be what it'll be. But it's been fun uploading on there again. I'd forgot how much I enjoyed it. So if you guys want to go support me over there, I'm uploading some classic stories onto there. Like we're doing a lot of like not really older, but like there's current stuff on there, but um, it's I don't know, just kind of running through my catalog at this point. As it always does. But yeah, I think that's about where we're at. So yeah, if you most everybody I'm seeing in chat already does, but support the channel, go to Spotify, go to Patreon, watch us on YouTube, become a super chat, however you consume the content is fine. I just like that you guys are here consuming content. It makes me feel like I'm not just writing into a void most days. But anyway, let's get on with the stories. Yeah. After not this week, but next week. After next week when we finish up, not for 2 weeks from now when we finish up the Klein Institute, I'm going to take a little break. So look for some long form stuff. And I might take a little break to recharge the old batteries and work on some other stuff. You know, the 5th through the 12th probably. I may come on and do something. I don't know. We may not have a live stream that week. I don't know. But we'll do something. Maybe I'll work on one of those choose your own adventures that you guys like, and we'll do one of those or something. Or I'll trot out an old one. We've got like 3 or 4 of them now. Oh. Absolutely, Osiris. You were definitely an integral part of that. I appreciate all of you guys for banding together there. So yeah, but say the 5th through the 12th, I'm just going to put up some long form stuff. So going to take a little bit of a content break there. That may be where we'll call the Rayford Woods stuff. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see how it's going. Then we may go back to Black Site. We may go back to... We can't go back to Laughing Audience. It's over. I may bring out something new. I don't know. We'll figure something out. There's always stuff going on around here, so we'll figure something out. I don't know if any of you guys watch Lone Wolf on YouTube. Lone Wolf Stories. But I've got a small part in his upcoming Invisible Man video, so if you watch him and you hear a familiar voice, it's probably me. I've got like 2 lines. He said he would keep it short for me so that I didn't blow my voice out. Hey Cindy, we're glad you could make it. Anyway, I've sat around and plugged stuff for long enough. Let's get into our Rayford Woods story, and as many of you remember, we just got back from the cannery. They discovered the poison that they'd been using to kill the beetles poison, the poison specifically meant for the beetles. And they escaped. They got back to the house. Terry discovered that there's bits of the foresters in there. And Jeff has been asking questions. Jeff has been asking some questions before he goes on a bug hunt with Uncle Terry there. So right now, the story is called A Warning, and I hope you guys enjoy it. When I got home, there was a police car in the driveway. Oh, silly me, I forgot my lip balm. Oh, I actually did reach out to Duke Cannons to see if they wanted to do a sponsorship. And they said they weren't interested right now, but they definitely keep my information on file. So I don't know, maybe we'll get a Duke Cannon spot here at some point or another. I didn't can't read today. It didn't look like the nice one that the sheriff had picked me up in right before my meeting with the mayor. It was a little older, a little rougher, and it was definitely in need of some service. It was likely just somebody here to see Dad, and as the 2 of us got out, I saw Dad grin as he walked up the steps. Looks like Deputy Gully's here to see us. That put my mind at ease a little. I've known Deputy Gully, or just Gully, most of my life. He and Dad went to high school together, and he's one of Dad's few friends who doesn't work out in the woods. He's a nice enough guy. He comes over sometimes to drink a beer or watch the game, and he was the one who found me in the road after Simon was taken. I remember him wrapping me in his coat and carrying me to the squad car, telling me how sorry he was for what had happened to me. I hadn't even told him what had happened to my brother, but he already seemed to know. I didn't think he was complicit in any of this, but in Rayford, you always knew when something like that happened. We came in. We came in and found him sitting at the table, a cup of coffee at hand as he talked to Mom about the next Ladies' Auxiliary bake sale. He was chatting away as he munched on a piece of pound cake at his other hand, and when the 2 of us came in, he looked up almost expectantly. He held a hand out for Dad. Try that again. He held a hand out for Dad, shaking mine as well after greeting me, but there was something about the way he looked at us that made me uneasy. Gully had always been a man who was full of smiles, but today his eyes looked very calculating. "What brings you by?" Dad said, as he cut a piece of pound cake for himself, despite Mom trying to shoo him away. "Not much. Haven't seen you in a little while. Thought I might come by and see how your son was settling in, and see what you've been up to lately." He was talking to Dad, but he never took his eyes off me. His eyes bore into me with something distrustful, and I'd begun to wonder what the real reason for his visit was. I'd... Had the sheriff said something to his deputies? Had he told them about a mysterious young man who he had seen at the cannery? I didn't know, but I suppose if it was serious enough, I might leave in handcuffs. Jeff? He's settling in pretty well. He's working on the Deepwoods crew now. They're not with me, though. Seems to be working out just fine. What do you say, Jeff? How are you settling into civilian life? Well enough. It's a little weird, living in a place where people aren't shooting at you all the time, but I'm making it. There we go. Dad laughed, but I noticed that Officer Gully did not. Either of you hear about what happened to the sheriff? I heard he got hurt, Dad said as he took a bite of his pound cake. Some kind of accident. Yeah, he got splashed with some kind of liquid. Says he was tinkering with the battery in his garage, and the damn thing popped on him. Burned the side of his face real good. They think he's going to be in the hospital for about a week while they try to repair the damage. I haven't seen the face yet, but it's probably not going to be great for him around election time. Dad laughed. I don't see anyone running against him. The sheriff's run unopposed for the last decade and a half. I don't suppose a couple of burn marks will turn people off too much. Jeff, Officer Gully said, as he took a sip of his coffee, his eyes still never leaving mine. I heard you've been spending a lot of time with that gal you went with in high school. Susan, was it? Yeah, I answered evenly. We've kind of been feeling things out, I suppose. We're just friends, though. Nothing romantic. I heard you've been spending a lot of time with that uncle of hers lately as well. You've got an interest in town history, do you? I held his gaze, but I was shivering a little inside. Hmm. I was shivering a little inside. Gully had done his homework, and I didn't know what he suspected and what he knew. Didn't. Everyone knew Terry's reputation, but having him included in that reputation. Everyone knew Terry's reputation, but having me included in that reputation might mean something and might mean nothing. Either way, I'd have to keep my head on a swivel if I intended to continue as we'd planned. Everyone has to have a hobby. Rayford's an interesting place. Why wouldn't I take an interest in the town and its history? Gully nodded, but his eyes still looked very calculating. You be careful he doesn't fill your head with nonsense. I know he's a town historian, but he's also something of a nut. He's got all these funny ideas about how things run and how they ought to be run. Some people would consider them dangerous ideas, and I just don't want to see a good boy like you get caught up in all that. Dad looked between us, seeming to understand that there was a little more going on in this conversation than he was understanding. We held each other's gaze for about 5 or 6 seconds, and when he finally looked away, I took another. He took another bite of his pound cake, and I sighed inwardly. This is outstanding pound cake, Margaret. This is what you're selling at the Ladies' Auxiliary bake sale. Oh, the one I'm selling is going to be a lot better than that. If Ruby Majors thinks she's going to skunk me with her lemon pound cake again, then she's got another thing coming. My raspberry swirl cake is going to be the talk of the town come next autumn. I have no doubt, Gully said, as he took another bite and sucked his fingers appreciatively. Well, I just wanted to catch up. I'll take my leave now. Jeff, would you mind showing me to the door? Is my boy in some kind of trouble? My dad asked, and I saw the officer tense a little as the words settled over him. Not a bit. Why would your boy be in any trouble? I've never had a lick of trouble out of him the whole time he's been here. I just want to ask him something. Maybe something a little private. It's fine, Dad, I said as I got up. I'll be glad to speak with Gully for a minute. I've got nothing to hide. Excuse me. Ugh. Get a little to drink there. Okay. The two of us headed out to the front porch, his gun prominently on display as he rested a hand on it. It wasn't an angry or a threatening gesture. It was something comfortable, something that he did often without thinking about it. It felt like it might be the safest place for his hand anyway. Gully was on record as having shot only one person in his whole 15-year career as a police officer. If he was going to get you, 9 times out of 10, he was going to put his hands on you. Gully had the kind of hands that you saw on prize fighters, and I really didn't want them anywhere near my vitals. Officer Gully, I started as the door closed, but he put a hand up to stop me. Nope, don't tell me a lie and ruin any of this. Look, the sheriff has you on his radar, and I could probably be fired for even telling you that much. I don't know if you were the one who burned him with whatever it was that got on his face, but he's pretty steamed about it. He's going to be in the hospital for at least another week, and when he gets clear, I think he might be coming for you. He can't prove it was you, but you can bet he'll be coming for you once he's patched up. You and Terry both could be in for a lot of hell. I just want you to be careful. I want you to keep your nose clean, and I want you to be safe. Don't do it for me. Do it for your dad. It means the world to him that you've moved back, and he likes the fact that you went into what he considers the family business. Don't break his heart by doing something stupid and getting yourself killed. Oof. There we go. I won't, I lied, and when he reached out, I shook his hand again. You're a good kid, Jeff. Don't end your life prematurely by getting mixed up in whatever Terry's working on. He left after that, pulled out of the driveway, and bent... pulled out of the driveway and went back to whatever he was doing, and I went back inside, but I thought over what we'd spoken about. If Officer Gully knew what I was doing, then you could bet that the sheriff had told a lot of them that he suspected something. Probably whatever he suspected Terry was up to, which amounted to messing up their operation. Gully was a good guy. I didn't think he would come after me without some pretty heavy evidence, but the same couldn't be said for all the cops on the force. In a town like this, we had a pretty big 12-man crew, and I believed that the sheriff would use them to his advantage when the time came. What was Gully talking about? I jumped a little as I saw Dad standing in the doorway to the living room. He was still munching on pound cake, but he had a worried look on his face, like he wasn't quite sure what he'd overheard. It's nothing, I lied. I was doing a lot of lying today, and it seemed I was making a habit of it. Sounded like a little more than nothing. You know I like Susan's family a lot, but her Uncle Terry often gets up to things that get him into trouble. I know he's the town historian. I know he does a lot for the library and the historical society, but he's also got a record, and he also gets on the wrong side of the mayor a lot. I can't tell you to stop working with Terry, but I would like you to be careful. If you get mixed up with the wrong kind of thing, it could ruin what you've built with the lumber company. You just need to be careful, son. You came out of something that could have easily killed you, and I don't want to see you get sent to prison for whatever Terry is cooking up this time. I'll be careful, I told him, and then on a whim, I stopped before going up the stairs and looked back at him. Dad, do you know anything about the beetles that live in the woods? Dad looked at me as if it was the last thing he had expected to talk about today, and he swallowed a big lump of pound cake before trying to answer. The beetles? I've run into 'em a few times in the deep woods. I know they eat damn near everything, including the trees. Sometimes you'll cut into a tree, and then they'll just come surging out like a bunch of ants out of a hill. Sometimes you'll go walking through what you think is a dry creek bed, and they'll just come boiling out, and you'll have to shake 'em off and run away. They're dangerous, but they've been around about as long as the town has. I guess we put down poison for them because they've never really done anything destructive in the last few decades. I nodded as he finished, figuring that was about it. Thanks, Dad. That was about what I figured. What makes you say that? Oh, skipped a line. One more thing, Dad said as I started to head upstairs, and I stopped in my tracks. They don't like the Foresters. What makes you say that? I asked, as I came back down the steps a little. Well, I remember when I was first starting out, and we were cutting in the woods close to the Hartswood. It's always a little creepy out there, and we hit one of those trees that just seems to be full of beetles. They came surging out and ate the axe right out of my hand. I went running back towards the truck, but I must have got turned around because the next thing I knew, I was lost in the mist. I remembered my training, and I sat down, not wanting to attract attention. That's when I heard the most god-awful sound I've ever heard. I heard one of the Foresters come walking up out of the woods. Well, half running, half walking, and he was covered in the beetles. They were biting and eating and taking off big chunks of him, and he just kept yelling and running as he tried to get away from them. I'm guessing they're really one of the few things that can hurt the Foresters. I've known guys that say they've seen them get cut with chainsaws and axes and even burned them with fire, and it doesn't seem to stop them in the least bit. They're tough, but I guess everything has to have an enemy. I didn't thank him that time. I just nodded and told him I was going to turn in early. I headed up to bed thinking that Saturday was going to be a nightmare. How do you hunt something that sees you as a part of its basic diet? How do you stop something that will literally strip the flesh off your bones? There you go. There's your Rayford story. Oof. Ugh. Whew. Swallowed too much pollen today. Really having to fight off the mucus today. Oof. So, I think we're going to move on to our Kashmir story today. As some of you know, the book club was hunting for the writer, and he's been running pretty good, trying to get help with some of our other Kashmir locals, but doesn't seem to be coming up with much, honestly. Excuse me. So, last week, he tried to go hide out in the cemetery, and unfortunately, our newly turned Earl decided to take advantage of it, and I guess he caught him. So, right now, we're listening to the aftermath where he tries to get his guys to come around and help him pick him up. So, today's story is called Checkmate, and I hope you guys enjoy it. When Tyler's phone rang, he nearly dropped it in the floorboard as he went to grab it. The sun was going down, and he still hadn't found the writer. That was okay. Tomorrow was another day, but as the phone buzzed, he figured it would be one of the book club. Nobody really called him after about 5 p.m., and he'd been thinking about taking the truck back to the depot and locking it up for the night. He had burned a lot of gas today, and it might be nice to do a little recon in his old pickup instead. The big green truck was big and powerful, but it was a real gas guzzler when it came to just running the roads. Tyler Durden, Waste Management. How may I help you, sir or ma'am? I've got him. Come down to the cemetery as fast as you can. Tyler pulled the phone from his ear and looked at the number. Wasn't a number he was familiar with, and this wasn't a voice he was familiar with either. He didn't know who was calling him, which made him a little nervous because he prided himself on knowing everyone in town. Who is this? It's Earl, or at least the person you know as Earl. Just get down here before he wakes up. I've only got one more needle of tranquilizer left, and I don't really want to shoot him up so close on the first dose. Too much of this stuff could kill him, and we need him alive. Tyler started to ask who it was again, but then the phone went dead, and he was left listening to a dial tone. Tyler was left with only two options: obey or ignore. He turned his truck towards the cemetery. He decided he would go and see what all the stir was about. Hang on a second, guys. All right. Where were we? I forgot. Let me check. He would go and see what all the stir was. Earl, or whatever was running him these days, was someone he did not want to trifle with on short acquaintances. When the flip phone in his pocket rang, Brandon put his foot down on the sidewalk and reached for it. It was... Excuse me. It had been a long day. He'd made about 12 deliveries, everywhere, from the outskirts of town to a shop right beside the restaurant they had ordered from. He was sweaty, his legs were tired, and he just knew that there were stains in his armpits. He expected it would be another order, probably his last one for the day, but instead it was a number he didn't recognize. It was a local number, but he didn't believe he'd ever gotten a call from it before. This is Brandon. If you're trying to get bike meals, you need to come to the cemetery. I've got him. Brandon had the same amount of confusion that Tyler had. Somehow, Grammarly missed like half a sentence there. Goodness. Had the same amount of confusion that Tyler had had. He didn't recognize the voice, but if they were calling from the cemetery, then it had to be Earl. A few times he'd spoken with Earl, The man who possessed that backwoods twang that seemed prominent out here. He sounded like a good old boy who was just doing what he had to do, but now he sounded completely different. The voice reminded him of Brother Thomas, but it was something colder. It reminded him of a film he had watched when he was a kid, a cartoon version of the Garden of Eden, where a snake had spoken to Eve. Its voice had been terrible, like a demon's voice, and that's a little what this was like. "Earl?" he asked, as he leaned against a sign to keep his balance. "Sure, why not? Whatever gets you to the graveyard the fastest. I have the writer. He's fallen into my hands, and I'm going to need help securing him. I need you to get down here as quickly as you can, so we can get him into Tyler's truck before anyone notices. It's evening. The gates to the cemetery are locked, so I need you to hurry before someone starts asking questions." He hung up on him then, and Brandon was left looking at the phone and wondering what he should do. There was no question what he would do. He would go to the cemetery. When someone called and told you they had captured the person you were seeking, you went and you helped. There was no time for questions, and there was no time for doubting. You had to go. You had to help. It's what Brother Thomas would tell him to do. It's probably what the Bright would tell him to do, but once again, Brandon just wasn't sure. His phone buzzed again. He looked down to see that it was a text from his boss. "A big order just came in. It's from the sub club. It's a doozy. Probably worth about $300, but you'll have to split it with Chase. It's too much for one bike driver, and it'll take both of you. Meet him down at the sub club in about 5 minutes. Don't be late." Don't be late. That part stuck in his brain, but instead, Brandon turned his bike towards the cemetery and began to pedal. If they had the rider, then his job was meaningless. His life was meaningless. His pursuits were meaningless. Everything was meaningless. He owed it to the Bright to go and be of assistance, and he needed to be quick. If the rider woke up and there was no one there to help, things could go sideways very quickly. His boss would be upset, but these were the breaks when you were dealing with matters on a cosmic scale. Angela was cleaning the table of dinner dishes when the phone on the wall rang. "I'll get it," her husband said as he started to get up, but Angela told him to sit down and that she would get it. They'd just finished a lovely pot roast dinner of... There we go. They had just... If I could talk... They had just finished a lovely dinner of pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and chocolate pudding for dessert. Her son was asking her for more juice, but Angela thought he might better switch to water before bedtime. It was his third juice today, the special juice that the church had given her, and she was a little worried about how much he liked it. He'd been talking to himself a lot. He'd been getting in trouble at school for not paying attention, and she was worried that there might be more than juice in there. She didn't think they would give her anything that would hurt her son, but it was beginning to look like it might be having negative effects on him. There we go. Angela caught the phone on the third ring and asked who it was. "I need you to call the book club and send them down to the cemetery as quickly as possible. I have the writer, but if you want to secure him, they need to be quick. I need at least 3 to 4 hands in the next 15 minutes. Make it happen." Then he hung up before Angela could even ask who it was. The cemetery. That had to be Earl. But it didn't sound anything like Earl. Angela had known Earl White. Angela had known Earl quite Angela had known Earl quite a while, and he had never spoken in anything other than that backwoods twang that she was so familiar with. She couldn't think of anyone else it could be, but the voice on the phone had reminded her of Brother Thomas more than anything. "Who was that, dear?" her husband asked, as he pushed away from the table and went to the cabinet to get himself a drink. No one. Someone from the book club wants me to call around about a meeting. They want to do a couple of days early this week so that we don't miss a doctor's appointment." So they don't miss it. Want to do the meeting a couple of days early so they don't miss a doctor's appointment. You and that You and that book club, her husband said good-naturedly. "I suspect it's a bunch of old hens cackling about some new Bleh. You and that book club, her husband said good-naturedly. "I suspect it's a bunch of old hens cackling about some new romance novel, isn't it?" If only he knew, Angela thought. She prepared another lie. "That's just what it is, dear. Let me make some phone calls, and you go have a drink." Mom, Mom, can I have more juice? I'd really like more juice." She looked down at him and felt something in her chest that she hadn't before. His eyes were shining like a cat caught in a flash. He looked half crazed, and Angela suddenly wondered if she could stand to give him the juice any longer. "It's almost bedtime, sugar. Why don't you get some water instead? You don't want to pee the bed, do you?" "No, no, I guess not. Maybe just a little bit of juice? Just a little bit?" Angela gave in. She really was a soft touch when it came to her son. She gave him just a little more juice, and after he drank it quicker than expected, she gave him some water and sent him to go get ready for bed. Then she started making phone calls in preparation for whatever was to come. She had to be quick. She had to be sure. They had to take the writer quickly or risk losing him forever. The right things would need to be done, and she was still strong enough to see it through. In the e- in the cemetery, Earl sat with the writer as he leaned heavily against his shoulder. "I hadn't thought it would be this easy," Earl said to himself. Of course, it wasn't really Earl. It was the creature that had taken up residence with him when he had looked into that strange book. Earl had fought. He fought as hard as he could, but in the end, it hadn't mattered. He had been taken nonetheless, and now he sat in the back seat of his own mind and watched things as they played out. The creature had done this many times, taking people and making them the way that he was. He couldn't say that he liked it or disliked it. It was something he did. It was his purpose. And now, his purpose was to open the gate so that his people could come in. All things served the bright, even the shadows around the edges of the light. "Very soon, you'll be like us," he said, as he heard the rumble of the garbage truck pulling up to the back gate. "And this whole town will be under new management." And there you go. That's your Kashmir story today. There we go. I had to add a little more. I had a stroke of genius there. Okay. Hmm. I think I think maybe we'll save Grandpa for our finale, and we'll go ahead and read the next two parts of the Klein Institute. So, as some of you will remember from last week, a psychiatrist is having trouble with some of his child patients who are having an irrational fear of birds suddenly. And he's gone poking around to see what the common denominator is, and it seems to be this place called the Klein Institute. So today, we are going to hear about what they do from someone who used to work there, someone he's meeting up with, after getting a weird warning from the mascot of the school. So, we're going to read part 3 and part 4 of the Klein Institute, and I hope you guys enjoy it. The man I met with was not what I had expected. We met in a diner, far out of town, a place he was sure that he would not be recognized. He was in his late 40s, his mustache thicker than the hair on his head. He looked old in that way that people who have worked hard their entire lives often do. Leathery skin, permanent dark circles under his eyes, arms that weren't muscular, but not weak. The arms of someone who pushes a broom and runs a floor waxer. He looked like 1,000 other people I knew, and I would have probably never noticed him if he hadn't raised a hand in greeting when he saw me. He was He had 2 bottles on the table, both of which were a brand of beer that I was familiar with. One was empty, and the other was half full, probably building up his courage to do something that likely made him uncomfortable. "You the doc?" "I am. I'm hoping I can talk to you about the Klein Institute." He picked up the bottle to have another sip and then seemed to think better of it. He put it down, picked it up again, and then put it down for good. It hit the table a little harder than it needed to, but he didn't seem to notice. He had already made up his mind about something, and I hoped it was deciding to talk to me. "I saw a lot of stuff there, but the first thing I need to know is why I should tell you any of it. I don't know you. I've only talked to you a few times on the internet, and I'm not the kind of guy who trusts easily. Are you a cop? Are you a representative of the school? I didn't get that feeling from you, but I've been wrong before." I wanted to laugh, but the man seemed so earnest about it. Clearly he had seen some things and been through some things that I couldn't understand. And he was nervous about talking to people. I wanted to put him at ease, but I just wasn't sure that I could. "I'm just a doctor who's worried about his patients. The kids I treat are suffering from something. It's something that I see a lot in adults, and once it takes hold, it hurts them on a deeper level. I don't want that for any of my kids. I want to fix what's wrong with them, and I know that if they keep going to the Institute, then it's not going to get any better. I just want some answers. I just want to know how to help them. And I'm hoping that what you can tell me will do just that." The man stared at the bottle again, ran his tongue over his lips, and when he reached for it, it was in that desperate way that I often see recovering alcoholics reach for things. A soda, gum, some sort of comfortable item that will keep them from picking up a drink for another day. He drained the bottle in one long pull, and when the waitress came to get my drink order, he ordered another one. She looked at it, started to protest, but shook her head and went off to get it. Just by the look on his face, she could tell that It wasn't going to do any good to argue with him. Make this a little bigger. There we go. I worked with the Klein Institute for 3 years. It was the first 3 years they were in operation, and I worked for them before they opened as well, back when they were just called the Institute. I helped them install flooring, helped them put doors on classrooms, and when all that was done, they asked me if I wanted a job as a janitor. I'd been working as a day laborer, one of about 20 guys they had picked up from this service or that service, and I jumped at the opportunity to have some regular work. I was between jobs. My previous employer had gone belly up, and that's why I was doing day labor in the first place. I was excited to get started. I know what they say about guys who do day labor, but it wasn't me. I don't have a criminal record. I'm not a drunk. I don't do drugs. I'm reliable, damn it. People take a look at my resume and they don't see that. They assume I'm hiding, and it makes them very hesitant to hire me. The guy who hired me, I guess he's the dean now, saw something that he liked, and I was glad he took a chance on me. Sir, I started, but he waved his hand at me to stop me. If you're going to hear the whole sad story, then you might as well call me Dan. Okay, Dan, I don't need the whole backstory. I just need to know what's going on with these kids. I need something I can take to the authorities so they'll do something about it. I need some proof that something bad is going on there. Dan shook his head, and when the lady brought his beer, he took a long drink before he set it down. They're not going to believe you. They don't believe anybody. No matter who goes to them, they need something, and they never do anything. The Klein Institute has them in their pocket anyway, and the only way anything's going to change is if someone burns that place to the ground. I can be pretty persuasive. Let me worry about that. Go ahead and tell it. Let me see what I can do. Dan nodded, took another sip, and then he gave me a look that should have made me very hesitant. It was a look that said he'd decided to trust me, but it was also a look that you give to a partner or a co-conspirator. Whatever the case, he'd decided to trust me, and he let it all roll out. Oh, excuse me. The first week the kids are there is called Immersion Week. They don't go home for 7 days. Their parents know where they are. They know they aren't going to see them until the following Monday. The class sizes are between 10 and 15 during Immersion Week. Basically, they take them, they bombard them with images and stimuli in this big room they call the movie room. It's all horrible stuff. It's all car crashes and horror movies and 1,000 other things, and the leader of the horror show is none other than Calvin Crowe. He tells the kids what will happen if they disobey. He tells them what's going to happen if they don't succeed, what's going to happen if they go against him. And a lot of the kids nearly lose their mind. Hang on. Is that this guy's name? I thought we called him something different. Yeah, okay. It was Calvin. I was reading it and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Is that what we called this guy? Okay, so. Nearly lose their mind. Alright. I hate those weeks. I used to have to clean up a lot of vomit and piss after the screening was over. They just let the kids stay there for a week while they show them images on a loop. They feed them. That's about it. The kids pass out where they're sitting and then wake up to be bombarded and immersed again. Did I call him Clarence this week? I may have to fix some of that. I might have switched from Calvin to Clarence. I don't know. We may have to fix that in production here. You'd think the kids would leave or tell their parents they don't want to come back. But after that week, they're completely in the school's pocket. I don't know how it works. I don't claim to know any of it, but the kids come out, they shower them, they feed them real good, and they send them back to their parents. Whatever they tell their parents, nobody ever tells the police or says anything. They make the parents sign about a pound of paperwork before they can even bring their kids there. And some of it lets the parents know that they'll pursue legal action if anything that goes on there is talked about. After that week, the kids are perfect little angels. They go to class, they do their work, they go to lunch, they do some more work, and then they go home, where they do 2 to 3 hours of homework a night. The teachers tell them how much homework to do, and that's how much they do. Have you ever heard of anything like that? The kids are so programmed that they go home and do more work. I know when I was a kid, if my teacher told me to do homework, I did the bare minimum, and then I went on to do whatever else I was doing. That's not how these kids operate. If the teacher says they do homework until bedtime, then they do homework till bedtime. That's just the way it is. But why? I ask, getting frustrated. Why would they continue to do what the Institute wants, even when they're not there? Mental conditioning only goes so far with children. I don't understand. Dan drained his third bottle and looked around suspiciously before going on. A lot of it has to do with the crow. I've heard that Calvin Crow has shown up at people's houses in the middle of the night to menace them. Sometimes he follows people around. Sometimes he stalks them through the halls of the school. It's all he's there for, and he does it very well. By the time they go on to other things, he's got those poor kids so wound up that they can't help but be successful. They're so terrified of that crow that to do anything else would be unthinkable. I pondered that for a moment, drinking my tea and trying to figure out something to go tell the police. It appeared that Dan wasn't done yet, though. He lives at the school, too. Has himself a nest in the boiler room. It's a terrible place. I used to hate having to go in any time I had to work on the boilers. Sometimes they bring kids down there. Bring them down there and leave them so that he can torment them and make them afraid. They come out shaking and crying, but they go right back to work, and you never hear a peep out of them after that. That got my attention. Are you telling me he's got a whole lair at the school? Yeah, at least he did 8 months ago when I was still working there. Is there any way that we can get in there? If I could take some pictures, I could take them to someone and get some justice for these poor kids. Dan looked like he was going to refuse, but he had enough liquid courage in him to make the idea sound plausible. You know, I still got some spare keys from when I worked there. I got a key to the back door, and I know for a fact they don't lock the boiler room like they're supposed to. I bet we can sneak in there and get what we're looking for. Hell, if he's still down there, you might get all the evidence you need. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go see what there is to be seen, then. Dan stared at a bit of spilled beer on the table for a minute, and when he looked up, his face was resolute. Yeah, let's do it. Be sure you follow me close, 'cause we can't park too close to the school. Let's get in there and stop all this, so that they never hurt another one of those kids again. That's part 3, and we'll move right on to part 4. Alright. I thought for sure we had it. Okay. Hang on. Let me change something real quick here. I realized I had spelled Klein 2 completely different ways as well. You guys are quiet tonight. Goodness. You guys are usually so chatty. Alrighty. Let's move on to part 4. And then, yeah. Then we'll read our grandpa story, and I guess we'll be done for the night. We're going to go on to part 4 then of Klein Institute, and I hope you guys enjoy it. We stopped on an overlook about half a mile from the Institute. There was a small range of mountains not too far from the school. That's probably what it is, Blondie. And people had been coming there to take pictures for a while. In the early morning and then the evening, around sunset, it was quite a nice place to visit. I'd come up here more than a few times when I was a kid, brought a few girls up here, come up here just to sit and think sometimes. But in the thick of the night, with all the harsh fluorescent lights of the school to provide a kind of backdrop, it was a very surgical and sterile place. It was like standing over a wound that had been scoured clean of tissue or infection. It made me shiver a little as the mountains sat blankly behind it. The Klein Institute was fairly large. It was made up of 17 buildings connected by small walkways between them. It was made up of 7 buildings connected by small walkways between them. There was a building for English, one for science, one for math, one for the arts, a gymnasium, one for geography and history, and then the last was the administrative building that sat in the middle like a heart. There was a field out back, a running track, several smaller sports fields for soccer or lacrosse, and hanging off the English building was a large library that made it look almost tumorous. The whole place was lit with soft. Bleh. The whole place was lit with softly glowing lights that seemed to cut the darkness away from it like an island. Dan and I were standing up there, just looking down at it, and the ride over seemed to have sobered him quite a bit. "We'll go in through the administration building. It won't be hard. They don't have night security," he said as he tossed me a hooded sweatshirt. It smelled like corn chips, and the dust flaked off of it as I shook it out, but I suppose the hood would hide my face. "We don't want the cameras to see us, because I'm sure there will be some kind of fallout from this afterward." "Where's the boiler room?" I asked, as I looked down at the school for something like pipes. "It's in the sub-basement, under the administration building. All of these disjointed buildings look really clean and professional on the surface, but they're all connected by the same system, which is underground. The whole place is a technological marvel, and it's a shame that they're using it for something like this," Dan said as he put on his own sweatshirt. Mine was blank, but his sweatshirt had the school logo across the front in strange white font. Maybe it had been a freebie for working for the school. Maybe there had been a time when Dan actually believed in what they were doing. Either way, it was a little strange to see him wearing it. "Come on," he said, as he made sure the hood would cover his whole face. "Let's go." I expected we would take the road, but when we went down the embankment and into the tree line, I realized this was going to be a little rougher than I had expected. The loose stones tumbled under our feet, and if it hadn't been for the boots that I had taken out of his back seat, I would have probably gone down with them. Oof. My loafers would have been a nice choice. My loafers wouldn't have been a nice choice. My loafers would have been a poor choice for this expedition, and it seemed that he had hiking attire for 2 or 3 people in the trunk of his car. Maybe he'd been planning something like this for a long time. Maybe it was just something he did often, but either way, he was prepared. He had slung on an old backpack before we set off, and by the way he was carrying it, I really wasn't sure what was inside. He was being very gentle with it, trying not to jostle it too much, and I wondered what exactly we were going to do today. Were we going to take pictures of some depraved bird nest in a boiler room, or were we going to destroy the edifice that had wronged him? Either way, it's too late to turn back now. The woods were all around us. The sounds of night birds and bugs were very loud as we crunched through the woods. You could see the lights of the school up ahead, but they looked hazy and mysterious through the trees. It was as if the whole it was as if a whole other world lay just beyond. I lost my spot again. Shit. There it is. It was as if a whole other world lay less than a mile ahead of us as we skulked on the outskirts of reality. I slapped my cheek as a mosquito landed on it, and I was glad that I had taken the sweatshirt when it was offered. Most of my skin was covered, which would mean that I wouldn't have a lot of bug bites tomorrow, and that would certainly lead me to be a lot less miserable. If Dan experienced any bug bites, he never said anything about it. He just kept walking, his shoulders set and his pace steady like a man on his way to the gallows. "Are you sure you can get in?" I asked, as we stepped lively through the woods, unless they've changed the locks, which I don't believe they have in the last year. It's expensive to swap out a whole school's worth of locks just because you fire one janitor. I don't imagine they realize I had keys made, so they'll never expect me to come back. Tell me about what you saw in the boiler room. Tell me about what happened that got you fired. A little conversation would make the woods a lot less creepy. The two of us having to navigate by moonlight. I wasn't scared. Not really. Only nervous as we made our way through the underbrush. At any moment, we could be set upon by an animal, bitten by a snake, or discovered by some sort of security detail. A little conversation would make the weight easier to bear, and I was feeling a little nervous about what we were doing. I didn't think he was going to say anything for a moment. Then I heard a slashing sound and realized sloshing sound, not a slashing sound. Then I heard a sloshing sound and realized he had taken a drink out of something in his pocket. When he turned around and offered it to me, I could smell the whiskey in the flask, and I took an experimental sip before coughing and nearly dropping it. He snatched it back from me like I might spill it all, and as he put the lid back on, he began to tell me what he had seen. Probably pretty expensive, Eld. I wasn't supposed to be down there. I mean, I was, but you had to schedule boiler room maintenance a couple of days in advance. I never understood why, but after what I saw, I figured it was so they could tidy the place up a bit. It was the middle of the day, and the lunch ladies couldn't get the hot water for the noon meal. They said something had to be going on with the hot water heater, and they asked if I'd go take a look so they could serve food. The principal was out doing something, and the assistant principal told me to go ahead in that distracted way that told me he hadn't even been listening. I didn't see anything wrong with it. The kids needed to eat, so I took my tools and went into the sub-basement so that I could check on the boiler. I came down the stairs with my flashlight out, and the second that I hit the bottom, I knew that something was going on down there. You could hear kids screaming, hear them moaning, hear them calling for their parents, and above it all, you could hear the voice of Calvin Crow as he cawed and screeched at them. He was he was telling them how they were failures and how no one would ever love them and how they needed to straighten up if they were ever going to be productive members of society. I knew enough not to bother him. I knew enough not to go in his way. Not to get in his way. But as I made my way towards the boiler, I couldn't help but pass his little nest down there. It's a real nest. He's made it out of twigs and hay, and I guess he sleeps in it or something. There are also bones on the corners of it. Rabbit, squirrel, whatever else he eats down there. It's usually covered by a curtain, but when I got down there, it's a hand. When I go down there, and I was told never to get nosy when I'm there for work. Today there was no curtain. It was just the nest, and something I hadn't noticed before. There were cages everywhere. Little dog cages, like you might put a Rottweiler in. There were kids in those cages. Dirty, crying children who were screaming and shaking and having the worst time imaginable. Calvin Crow had one of them out of the cage, and he was shaking him and screeching in his face. The kid couldn't have been older than about 10, and his eyes made him look like a frightened deer. The kid looked like he'd been at this for hours, like this bastard had just been screaming at him and breaking him down for days. And as I watched the kid flop around like a rag doll, I acted before I could think about it. I'd seen something. I can't find it now. I told the crow to let the kid down, that he was going to kill him, and he turned his head to look at me like he couldn't believe that anyone was daring to speak now. He tossed the kid aside, right into the nest, and he squawked at me and started flapping his wings. He came running at me like a rooster who's trying to put away a predator. But I wasn't backing down. I punched him in the face, right in the beak, and that's when I realized the most horrible thing of all. It's not a costume. Well, part of it might be, but the head is real. I don't know if he's had surgery or if he's just some kind of deformed creature, but I saw feathers fly and he began to bleed from the corner of his beak. One of the wings flapped a little, and you could tell that it was just part of a costume. Grammarly does not like the word flapped, apparently. Underneath, he's got these big deformed arms that are mostly skin. They kind of look like big paddles. He fell back against the nest, still squawking and screaming, and that's when I'd had as much of it as I could take. I ran. The coward in me got the better of me, and I left my tools down there and just ran out of the school. I kept running till I got to my car, but as I tried to crank the engine, I looked back at the school and saw him standing there. He was glaring at me through the double doors, the blood still oozing from the corner of his beak. And as the engine kicked on, I tore out of the parking lot and drove home. I saw him shaking as excuse me. I saw him shaking as we walked, something that was hard to tell from his sweatshirt, and it seemed like the story had really rattled him. They called me later that afternoon and officially fired me. They said I'd assaulted a school official and that I wasn't welcome on the grounds anymore. He was down there hurting kids, and they still took up for him. He was down there putting kids in cages and shaking them and probably giving them brain damage, and they still fired me rather than change anything. They didn't even send me my last check. I've been trying to fight against them ever since. I know what they're doing there, and I know what they're doing in the halls. I know what the crow is doing to the children, and I can't stand it anymore. We broke the tree line, and suddenly we were on the well-maintained lawn of Klein Institute. The lights were on, and you could see the security cameras on the edges of the school building, but other than that, there was no one for miles. It was It was so peaceful here that you almost imagined that you were the only person in the world. The crickets encircled us with their chirping, but I noticed that the bird song stayed in the woods. They didn't want any part of a school, any part of the school. They didn't want any part of the school any more than I did, and Dan hunched a little as he approached the administrative building. Stay low. We can't hide from the cameras, but if they see your face, then it's all over. You'll get a visit from the police in pretty short order, if you don't get a visit from the Crow himself. I thought about the feather in my office and realized the last thing I wanted was a visit from Calvin Crow. Dan slid the key easily into the lock, and as the door opened, we passed into the well-manicured lawn. Yeah, from the well-manicured lawn. Mm. And as the door opened, we passed from the well-manicured lawn into the sterile interior of the school. We went quickly through the halls, more than one of the cameras blinking at us from above the corridors. And he seemed to be looking at the room numbers as he made his way towards the boiler room. The walls were covered in the usual displays of artwork and progress that most schools had. There was a bulletin board where you could see student artwork. There was another one where essays were displayed. There were pictures of kids who had achieved this or that, and there were even class projects hung up proudly where visitors could take a look. None of it seemed to be the trappings of a place that hurt children, but I suppose most places don't put that kind of thing on display. We cut down a few hallways, and finally, we made it to the boiler room. It was set It was a set of big rusty double doors, and they seemed to stand out in this sterile place. The walls behind them almost seemed to be weeping, as if whatever was in the sub-basement was wet and unhealthy. Dan slid another key into the lock, and after a little bit of pushing, the door came open. The rumor is that the sub-basement was here first. Something else had been here before the school, and they just kind of built on top of it. I don't know if I believe that, but the sub-basement looks a lot different than the rest of the school. Last chance to back out. Won't hold it against you if you do. It's about to get very real very quickly. I shook my head at him and told him I'd come too far to back down now. He nodded and invited me into the bowels of Klein Institute. All righty. And we'll have to see what happens to these two in the conclusion on our next live stream. Because I've already got part 5 and part 6 done, but that's a special Mousecatool we'll save for later. Ooh. Is it raining again? Goodness. Oh. Alrighty. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Let me get a few things ready, because I'm going to have to add some glimmer lines in here as well. Oh. Okay. Let me get a few things ready, and we will get this on the road. All right, there. All righty. Let's get this show on the road. No, I don't think that's the one. That's the one. Okay. That goes away. All right. So we are going to do the Grandpa finale. So get your tissue boxes out and get ready for a good send off. Let's see if my voice will hold out. All right. So, this one is called Grandpa's Friend Was a Tree. As we started, so we shall end. That the rest of that's not the title. It's just Grandpa's Friend Was a Tree. But I figured it would be fitting to kind of go out how we went in. So, I do hope you guys enjoy it. Friday arrived by way of an alarm that went off at 4:30 in the morning. Normally, Grandpa would have woken me up and told me to shake a leg because we were burning dark hours before daylight. But Grandpa had been in bed for the last 2 days. It started Tuesday when I came to give him dinner and found him slumped over one of his books. I thought he was just asleep, but his breathing was irregular when I picked him up, and I wheeled out an oxygen tank that I had been hoping not to use and hooked him up. Grandpa had needed oxygen on and off for the last year, though he had mostly only needed it for emergencies. He came to after a few minutes and told me he had gotten sleepy while he was going over something. I put him to bed and told me I put him to bed and told him to let me know if he needed anything. Every time I've checked on him for the last 2 days, he's been lying in bed, and he's mostly been sleeping. I want to think that he's trying to marshal his strength for the hike, but I was honestly pretty sure I might find him dead when I went to get him up. I dreaded that for the past 2 days, just coming in to find that he had passed in his sleep. As I opened the door and whispered to him today, however, I was in for a little bit of a surprise. Grandpa still had the oxygen, but he was dressed in flannel and blue jeans, though he had traded his hiking boots for a pair of soft slippers. Grandpa had always Grandpa had become more of a realist as time went on, and he knew there was going to be no hiking to the clearing on his own accord. He might start out moving, but I would probably have to carry him most of the way. He looked up and smiled at me as he saw me come in, pointing to a big rucksack that that I had been working on for the last couple of days. I made sure that the harness was in place, he said, as he got shakily to his feet. I think it's as ready as it's ever gonna be. Let's get a move on, kid. I want to get there before the old ghoul figures out what we're up to. He didn't so much say it as he wheezed it. Grandpa's speech had been getting more and more difficult to understand, and he just seemed to run out of breath so easily these days. The travois that we had rigged up had a spot for the oxygen tank, something I'd added yesterday, and as I eased him into it and tested the straps, he looked like one of those Indian kids who rides around on their mother's back, the kind of thing you see in old museum photos sometimes. Not a very dignified way to head into the woods, he said with a little cough. But I suppose beggars can't be choosers. I carried him to the back porch, making sure that the straps fit as well as they could, and then I headed out on our hike as the sun began to peek over the horizon. We hadn't gone very far into the woods when I heard a light brush of footsteps across the uneven ground ahead of us. Even a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to pick out Glimmer as she crept through the woods, but now her steps were as familiar to me as her laughter. I turned to see her lurking not too far away, and I smiled as I waved her over. You don't have to come with us. I know you don't do well in the sunlight, and I know you need your rest. Let's see if we can get the lines here.
I wouldn't miss it for the world. I want to be with you as you undertake this journey. I want to see him into the clearing.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it right there. All right. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I want to be with you as you undertake this journey. I want to see him into the clearing. The way she said it made me a little uneasy, but I put it off as nerves. Grandpa and Glimmer had met a few times before his bout of extended sleep, though they seemed a little private about what they were talking about. I wasn't jealous or worried about it, but it seemed odd that they would leave me out of their discussion. Grandpa and I had apparently had a lot of secrets lately, and not being included made me feel like he was still keeping something back. For Glimmer's part, she wouldn't say what the old man was planning.
It was something he wanted to discuss only with me. He made me swear to not talk about it until later. He wants to be sure that it will work before he says more.
It was something he wanted to discuss only with me. He made me swear not to talk about it until later. He wants to be sure that it will work before he says more. She had looked sad in those moments, sad and a little unsure of herself. I'd started to ask questions before she shook her head and covered my mouth with a hand.
I will be clear, Sunny. enough, my love. Stay the course and trust in Fisher.
All right. All will be clear soon enough, my love. Stay the course and trust in Fisher. We had just set off again when I heard a less practiced foot come thundering into the woods. I knew who it was, but I had honestly expected that he would miss us. John and I had become very close friends in the short time that we had known each other, but I knew that John was more of a night owl than a morning person. This was usually when he was getting off to go to bed, and he had said it was unlikely that he could get someone to cover for him, so he could meet us before our hike. Not only had he managed it, but he had a backpack of his own, and seemed to be running to catch up. Sorry, I didn't think he was going to get there in time. David's a great guy, but his time management skills leave a lot to be desired. I put a hand on his shoulder, glad to see him, but also a little worried. Glimmer was one thing, but I didn't want to involve John in this if I didn't have to. I didn't think that the Weldergeist would hurt any of us, but with creatures like this, you really never knew. If he found us trying to conceal Grandpa in the woods, he could become very upset, and I didn't need any blowback from this, hitting my friends. It's not too late, John. I know you've been up all night. You can still go to bed. I won't hold it against you. John shook his head and gave me a thumbs up. Nope, I want to go with you guys. I want to be there to make sure everything goes okay. The orderly has told me I might have some kind of sway with the Weldergeist anyway, so if things go bad, maybe I can stall him or convince him to turn away. Also, I haven't hiked in a while, and it could be fun. I doubted that any of this was going to be particularly fun, but I nodded and told him to come along with us. He fell in step, and the four of us headed into the unknown together. It's a nice day for it, John said, his boots squeaking a little as he walked.
This is where we met, Fisher. Do you remember? Do you remember that?
Oh, dang it, I skipped some lines. Stand by. I skipped a line when I sent it to her, so I gotta doctor some lines real quick. I'm not sure there is such a I'm not sure if I could talk today. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a nice day for this, I said distractedly. John laughed, hoping my anxiety. John laughed. John laughed. I can't imagine trying to make a trip like this at night. Sounds like a great way to break a leg. I expected Grandpa to chime in with something, but he was surprisingly quiet on the trip there. He sat strapped to my back as I walked, his wheezing the only thing to indicate that he hadn't suddenly passed on. And after a little more small talk from the three of us, I turned my head and asked if he was okay. Fine, he said, without hesitation or enthusiasm. "What are you thinking about, Gramps? Seems pretty heavy, whatever it is." Grandpa was quiet for a moment, seeming to collect his thoughts as the forest woke up around us. It was early, about an hour after dawn now, but you could still hear birds just lifting their wings off their faces, squirrels disentangling themselves from holes as they began looking for food, and the sound of larger animals as they went to look for their daily meal or find safer accommodations for sleep later. As the minutes stretched on and Grandpa still hadn't answered me, I began to think I wasn't going to get one. He might he might go the whole way without some kind of grandpa lecture or a story about a time that was similar, but when he began to speak in that wheezing voice that had become normal for him, I was surprised at the depth of his thoughts. "I was just thinking how little the forest has changed since I was a kid. I recognize the trees that I've passed so many times before. I recognize the rocks along the path, the way the stream sets between the banks, but I wonder what it must look like to them." "To them?" I asked, not really understanding. "To the trees. What must all of this look like to them? What does time's progression look like for a tree?" "They've seen me as a kid in short pants with scabby knees, as a young man trying to find his way in the world, as an adult attempting to bring food and medicine from their depths, and then as an old man trying to stay alive a little while longer. How fruitless and small must my life seem to them? To them, it's only been a little while, a season or two, since I started coming into the woods. But to me, it's been my whole life. I wonder what that must be like." I wanted to say something, to lighten the mood, a stupid joke, a one-liner that would put everyone at ease, but I couldn't find anything to say. This was a little different from Grandpa. I wasn't used to him being so maudlin, quite this dark, and I began to wonder if we really were heading to some kind of finale. Grandpa sounded as if he were in the back of a wagon as he headed to the gallows, and the farther we walked, the more I hoped I was wrong. We'd get through this. We'd have more time with Grandpa, even if it was only a couple of months or a couple of years or even a couple of hours. There would be time for stories and time for another beer and time for so many other things. I had to believe that. If I didn't believe it, then why was I hauling him into the woods? If I didn't believe that, then why else was I saving him from the consequences of his actions? I tried not to think about his story, the last story he had ever told me, but it was hard. Grandpa had always told me about the sanctity of magic and the purity of life. Once things were dead, they were dead. You didn't go messing around with the natural order of things, but it appeared that Grandpa had tried to do just that. When his own power wasn't up to the challenge, he had gone and gotten more from a highly questionable source. These were things that Grandpa had told me not to do, had firmly warned me against because such things had dire consequences. I suppose it's hard to realize that my grandpa knew about those consequences from her first-hand experience. It made me wonder how many stories there were in between stories, stories where he did things he wasn't proud of, and was now feeling too ashamed to tell me. I didn't want to think about that, because I wanted my final memories of Grandpa to be the ones I would always keep with me. I wanted to remember him as that smiling old man who was sitting on the porch with a beer in his hand and a story on his lips. I didn't want to imagine my grandfather as someone capable of anything beyond joy and laughter. We walked in silence for a while, and the next one to speak was Glimmer. We were going over a small river, little more than a stream, but it was nearly 2.5 feet deep, and the current was a little treacherous. You had to be careful where you put your feet because the rocks were slippery. It was a place I'd been to before, and as I took Glimmer's hand so I could go up the other bank, I saw her looking at a stump not too far from the edge. Excuse me.
This is when we met, Fisher. Do you remember? Do you remember that day? This is Fisher. Do you remember? Do you remember that day?
This is where we met, Fisher. Do you remember? Do you remember that day? Grandpa looked at the stump, craning his neck around painfully, and smiled. It's a memory I'll keep with me always, Grandpa said, as I turned around so he wouldn't hurt his neck. I'll never forget looking up and seeing a pair of bright eyes as I cooked my fish. It was one of the best times of my life, and I was blessed to have you, Glimmer.
Continue to be blessed, Fisher. I'm not quite ready to do without you yet.
Continue to be blessed, Fisher. I'm not quite ready to go without you yet. She reached out and squeezed his hand, but as she took the lead again, I saw something sad cross Grandpa's face. We continued on, but it appeared that Glimmer wasn't the only one who had decided they couldn't go without Grandpa. As we moved through the woods, I was aware of something trailing us. It would get close and then move away again, but it was definitely following behind our group. I didn't know what it was, but sometimes I would get weird glimpses of a figure before he pulled himself behind a tree. I was almost certain it was the Weldergeist, but this deep in the woods, you couldn't be sure. It was very unsettling, and though I didn't tell John, I was quite sure that Glimmer knew we were being tracked. She would break off every now and again, only to come back to give me a thumbs up. I had no idea what the thumbs up meant, but I thought maybe she was hiding our tracks or maybe leaving a false trail for whatever was behind us. I checked my watch and saw that it was almost 11 o'clock when my stomach began to growl. We'd been hiking for about 5 hours, and I didn't suppose we were likely to stop for a meal until we arrived at the clearing. John was doing all right. He was keeping pace, and Glimmer seemed as if this was nothing but a short stroll for her. I suppose after all those hunting trips, that's basically what it was. She was used to long-distance hikes with a lot of gear on, and when she moved up next to me, I assumed she just wanted to bump my shoulder or give me a little support. When she whispered in my ear, I realized it was something a little more serious. He's following us. Yeah, I said, peeking back as we walked. Has been for a while. Glimmer glanced at him for half a second before turning back.
Jen and I can keep walking forward while you and Fisher use him, but we will need to make an illusion convincing enough to fool the creature.
Oh, poop. Give me just a second. All right, that might work. Grandpa made a sound, and I was about to ask what was wrong when he said, "We need a distraction."
No, Jen and I can keep walking forward while you and Fisher use him, but we will need to make an illusion convincing enough to fool the creature.
All right. John and I can keep walking forward while you and Fisher lose him, but we will need to make an illusion convincing enough to fool the creature. Is that safe? I asked, half tripping over a root. Glimmer caught me by the shoulder and set me back on the path.
The guy doesn't have a deal with John or me. He can hurt us without reason, and this reason isn't good enough. Let us help and get him to the clearing before it's too late.
Right. There it is. The Geist doesn't have a deal with John or me. He can't hurt us without reason, and this reason isn't good enough. Let us help and get him to the clearing before it's too late. Gramps, can you manage that? He was silent for a minute, and when he nodded, I felt it in my shoulder. He didn't say anything, but suddenly there was a shimmer, and it was like someone had projected something over the top of us. At the same time, I focused my will on my part of the operation. I wasn't good at subtle things like veils and illusions, but there was something I could do. I could pull up something around us that would obscure our presence, and if he had the image to glance at, then he might not look too hard at my covering. We broke left as they broke right, and as I crouched off the path, I saw the Weldergeist emerge from the woods and follow after them. He was keeping a stalking distance from the group, clearly biding his time before he struck, and as he came to the crossroads, I held my breath and waited for him to pass. He paused for a moment, the Weldergeist less than 30 feet away from us, and I worried that maybe he had seen through our little trick. Then he headed off after them, and once he was out of sight, I took off. I moved as fast as I dared towards the clearing. We were close now. I could almost smell it, and Grandpa seemed to smell it too. He looked around, the picture of liveliness, and he wheezed for me a little for me to hurry. He hadn't coughed in a while, something that surprised me, and I hoped it was a good sign. Maybe the grove was where we should have gone all along. There was magic there, real magic, and the distance seemed to melt away as we came quickly through the trees. So, what's the plan once we get there? Grandpa didn't say anything, just lay against my back as he watched the forest thin out around him. How long do we need to stay in the grove? Is there a time limit? Are we just staying there until the sun sets? Grandpa still said nothing. If it hadn't been for the wheeze that he still had his breath every now and again, I would have thought he had simply expired, but I could still hear his respirations, and I knew that he could still hear me. Seriously, if you want me to help, I need to know what's going on. What are we doing in the grove? When he made a shushing sound, I was so surprised that I actually did stop talking. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy the trip. You never know how many more trips through the woods you have. One day, each of us will take our last trip through the woods, but we may not even know there isn't another one sometime later. I thought I had taken my last trip, my last walk through the trees, but it appears I had one more left in me. Don't worry about the grove, son. Just enjoy the trip. I know it's one that I'll never forget. I felt a sob creep up my throat, and I didn't fully understand it till later. I decided to take him up on his offer, and the two of us walked in silence until we finally came to the edge of the clearing. As we came into the grove, I saw it all set out before me. It was beautiful. The space had always made me feel a deeper connection to the woods around me. This was a place we came when we needed to clear our heads, when we were celebrating the turn of the seasons, or just because Grandpa wanted to visit his friend. When I sat down the pack and helped him to climb out, it was as if he had found a hidden wellspring of strength, and he walked slowly towards the tree that had once been his friend. Good to see you, Wren. He put his hand on the trunk, and as the sun fell across a few hanging leaves, it fell on the golden sap that lingered on the bark. Grandpa's hand was so close to the sap. Another inch, and he'd get to see what Wren had experienced. I started to say something, started to warn him, but he looked back at me with a grin that told me he knew what he was doing. Gramps, that sap will... He slid his hand into the sap quickly before he could lose his nerve, and then stepped to the left of his friend as the change began to take place. He wiped the sap across both hands, swiped it across his face, and shook his head as the horror spread through me. Don't get too close, kid. This is my decision. This is how I want to go out. I didn't care. I went to him anyway. As his skin became hard and his hands began to lengthen, I hugged him against my chest as I wept. He could have told me. He could have said something. I didn't care at that moment if I became a tree too. Grandpa's life was saved, but this part of it would never be the same again. He would live as the very trees that he had questioned. He would never be my grandfather after today. I'd never hear him tell me another story. I'd never clink a beer against his bottle, and for all intents and purposes, he'd be gone. Don't cry, son, he said. his voice deepening as the wheeze left it. "This is the only way." But, but the meadow, you said it would protect you. And it will. It will protect me forever. I will fear neither cancer, nor spirit, nor any of those earthly problems again. I will be of the forest. I'll be here with Wren and your grandmother forever. I heard something behind me, but I didn't turn. It didn't matter. My tears fell upon his bark as he began to stretch and grow. His features softened, his body elongated, and soon it was like talking to a pattern on the trunk. His eyes were still there, looking at me as his face rose, and he grew beyond my grip. I looked up and stared at that wise old face I loved so much. "You can visit me any time, son. This place is yours as well. Come visit me often, because I will miss you so much as you miss me. I love you so." He grated out, and as his mouth became one with the bark, and he stood before me as a tall, proud oak, I heard his voice in my head as he whispered, "And I always will. Thank you for ending this journey with me. Thank you for everything." Then he was gone. No, not gone. He'd moved beyond his and every other problem. When the spirit came into the glade, I felt the wrongness of him. When he moved up beside me, I started to tell him to go away. I started to tell him not to touch my grandfather, that he wasn't his to take anymore. I doubted it would have done any good, but it would have made me feel less weak. The Weldergeist touched the bark of Grandpa's tree, and when he began to laugh, I looked up at him to see him shaking his skeletal head. Clever old man. He figured out a way to cheat me. Well done. Our deal is at an end, I suppose. He gave Grandpa one more appreciative pat and turned to go. Ugh. Oof. Just like that? I asked him. I knew I shouldn't have taunted him, but I didn't care right then. I was furious, and I needed something to direct my anger at. My dismay was also making me less fearful than I should have been, and I didn't care at that moment what happened. The Weldergeist shrugged. I can't take his soul as long as he remains a tree. Our pact is complete. I will await your moment of weakness with great anticipation, Marcus, he added, walking into the woods as he took his leave. It'll never happen, I shouted at his back, and his retort made it sound all the more hollow. That's what everyone says, until the time comes. That was where Glimmer found us. I heard John come crashing out of the woods, and as Glimmer saw what had become of Grandpa, she wept and threw herself at the base of the tree. John looked confused, his wonder at the sight of the place clearly at odds with his curiosity about what was... Oof. All right. No. With his curiosity about what was going on, Glimmer clung to the bottom of the tree as she cried, shouting his name as she pushed her forehead against the bark.
He was supposed to wait. I told him not to. I begged him not to do this, but he said he wouldn't wait for me to get here. I wanted to say goodbye. I was owed a chance to say goodbye this time.
I need that. He was supposed to wait. I told him not to go. I begged him not to do this, but he said he would wait for me to get here. I wanted to say goodbye. I was owed a chance to say goodbye this time. A part of bleh. A part of me wanted to accuse her of knowing what he would do, but another shit. A part of me wanted to accuse her of knowing what he would do, but another part of me wanted nothing but to comfort the woman I loved, and that was the part of me that won out in the end. I put an arm around her and gave her the comfort that I had needed a short time ago, and as we cried there together, I heard John approach and put a hand on the old tree as he looked up into the leaves so high above. So, wait, where's Grandpa?
He'll always be here. He'll be here so long as there are roots, so long as magic protect this place, so long as we love him.
He's here. He'll always be here. He'll be here so long as there are woods, so long as magic protects this place, and so long as we love him, Glimmer whispered, putting a hand on the bark. I nodded. Her words were a fine epitaph for a man I had loved so much, for a man who had meant so much to me and so many others. Her words only made John more confused, and when he looked down at us, his concern was genuine. So, wait, did your grandpa turn into a tree? John's question seemed to snap me back to reality, and when I looked at him, the set of his face made me laugh. I couldn't help it. It was just so ridiculous, and he was just so utterly confused by what must have made very little sense to him. Yeah, he did. Tell you what, I'll tell you all about it on the way home. Glimmer and I took one more look at Grandpa, now standing as a mighty oak tree beside his friend of so many years. Grandpa had been right. I would be able to come see him again. He'd always be here if I needed him, and I knew that there would be many trips in the future to come and check on the old man. For now, however, it was time to get back to life as it had always been, though it would certainly be strange without the old man. You see, I said, as I threw an arm around John and another around Glimmer as the three of us left the clearing. Grandpa had this friend when he was younger. His name was Wren, and he turned into a tree. And there you go. That's your grandpa story. That's the last grandpa story. I'm not crying. You're crying. Stop it. Get some help. I would never. But yeah, that's it. Special thanks to Ladama for voicing Glimmer all these years. Again, she will be back. They'll all be back. There will be more stories about Marcus as he tries to do his best to fill Grandpa's shoes, I'm sure. But for now, that's where she ends. I do hope you guys enjoyed tonight's stories. I found it was a pretty good send off for old Grandpa. And I hope we'll see you guys again next time for our next live stream. Till then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you guys a wonderful day and a spooky evening. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Catch you later.